Cool. Yes. So yeah, welcome everyone. Thanks a lot for being here. Um, Thanks a lot to the Anarchist Bookfair 2020 for organizing this. And first of all, I want to start by explaining who we are. We organize under GAF, which is the Green Anti-Capitalist Front, which is an alliance of groups and individuals united by our belief that capitalism is one of the core causes of the environmental crisis, threatening us all. And if we do not act soon, the cause of the crisis will fall on the poor and powerless. One of the coolest things about the GAF banner is that it's not a group, it's not an organization, it doesn't have a membership. It's just a set of principles that you can agree with and organize under freely. You don't have to ask for permission from anybody, especially not us, to use the GAF banner. And in fact, we encourage you to take autonomous action under the GAF banner and to organize your own affinity groups and collectives under it. But if there's anything we can help, feel free to contact us on our website, greenanticapitalist.org, or send us an email, and we'll do anything we can to help. And also, if you want to join one of the existing affinity groups or collectives, you can message us as well, or message them. There's several all across the UK and even outside UK. There was recently a group set up in Philly in the USA, which is pretty crazy. So yeah. So on with the presentation, we are going to be talking about the GRASS project, which took place during since the more or less the end of February this year until sort of the end of the lockdown, more or less, a bit before. The date is a bit fuzzy. The time is complicated right now with the pandemic. But yeah, it lasted several months, and it was a really interesting project from which I personally learned a lot. It was quite intense, and I wanted to document the experience so other people could examine it as well, and also to share what we learned from the victories and mistakes of the project, and hopefully discuss a bit and reflect and come up with new ways to tackle the issues that GAF is concerned about. So first of all, I want to start with every anarchist presentation should start, which is with the death by a quote by a dead white guy. In this case, Daddy Malatesta, who said, "We anarchists do not want to emancipate the people, want the people to emancipate themselves." This is, for me, at the core of what many of us wanted to do with GAF, with GRASS, and also I think the standard by which we will evaluate is merits and what we managed to achieve. I don't necessarily think we completely lived up to it, but I think we failed to live up to it in really interesting ways. So yeah, keep that in mind. Also, if you want that picture of Malatesta for personal use, send me a message. I'll send it to you. To begin with, I want to talk about the origins of the project. So, as some of you might know, at the end of February, GAF organized a week of action where we wanted to take many different kinds of activities and demos and talks and stuff like that. We basically copied a bit XR in having like a week or two where they do all kinds of activities, but more radical. And we organized a lot of things. Many of them came out of an assembly that we held like several months before. I don't want to get too much in detail into the Week of Action or the assembly and all that, because we've talked about that in other places. But as part of this, one of the things that we realize is that in order to host all the talks and all the film nights and all the workshops that we wanted to do, we needed a physical space to take to have it to have them in. And although there are several anarchist spaces in London that we may have been able to use, we were really intoxicated by the idea of having a squad be our center of operation for the Week of Action. So we started looking for places, and I mean, long story short, we ended up occupying a police station in the middle of London, specifically the Paddington Green police station, which used to be the highest security police station of the whole of the UK, which hold, from Islamic terrorists to IRA, freedom fighters, and briefly it held us as well. Again, this is a separate project. It turns out to be, because although initially we wanted this to be the place where we will host all of events for the Week of Action, the occupation of Paddington Green became its own project once we were in, because, well, it was I'll show you some photos if you haven't seen it yet, but it's such a massive building with such a immense significance, that really just occupying it, maintaining it, publicizing it became its own project, and it started to consume a lot of our time and a lot of the, reaching out to the local community, organizing, talks and stuff that we wanted to do. It all had to be pushed back because of lack of time, lack of capacity, and just the fact that we were having the fucking Guardian and the Daily Mail knocking on our door wanting to interview us and all that fucking bullshit. So it was just an absolute chaos. And also, by the time we were kind of we were properly settled in Paddington Green, we were able to open it to the public. It was quite late, and very little after, we got court papers, and it was obvious that we were going to be evicted quite soon. And that was a problem because we couldn't host, public events, talks, and stuff like that in a place that could be evicted by high court bailiffs at any point. That's just not something that is, accessible for most people, and it's not how we wanted to do it. So we had to find a different location, and that was Grass, which was in the George Pub, near Holloway Road station, just a couple of minutes from there. So this was the place we found. Much nicer, much smaller, but much easier to clean up, to live in. Heating and water was working from the minute we got in. And yeah, it was just a really nice place. And in a way, we had learned our lesson from Paddington Green in that instead of waiting to kind of engage with the local community until we were completely ready, we started doing it as soon as possible. We got ready for. We cleaned the place really fast. We got some coffee and tea, and I think I have a photo here. We got out and we started giving away leaflets to people passing by and offering coffee and tea and just chatting with them and letting them know that the social center was open, that we were going to be hosting events and that kind of stuff. And I think that focus from the very beginning on this kind of like community interaction really shaped the project and made it much closer to what we wanted to to do. Which, because grass, I think I forgot to mention, grass it stands for Green Radical Anti-Capitalist Social Space or Social Squad, or allegedly it also stands for Get Revenge Against Seeker Service. But yeah, we wanted for it to be a social center, and that means a place for the local community to interact and to with the wider radical movements, and to be that kind of like link between people who are not normally involved with anarchists, anti-fascists, anti-authoritarians, green radicals and all that, to interact with us, to get to know us, and to kind of like form those links, which we thought it was really important. And yeah, as you can see, we made it look really, really nice. We had like a sort of like an info shop. We had like a stands with books and posters all around. It was generally a really nice space. I think everyone who was there from those like first weeks had a really good experience and really good memories of the atmosphere in there. And I think it really felt like it was, a true community was forming, and there was like an enthusiasm for what we could do with the place. And then finally we got to the GAF Week of Action, and for a whole week, events were happening every day. We were open to the public every day with coffee and food and everything else. We made and funny story, that ramp over there that allowed us to make it accessible for people on wheelchairs actually was donated by a nearby yoga center, who lent us to us very, very we were very thankful for them. And that was really nice to like that immediately we were getting like solidarity from people around us, from our neighbors, and they were like helping us out. And yeah, that was a really good kind of start. And the Week of Action, again, I don't want to like get too much into details about it, but it was when grass worked as a proper social center fully. To the every day there were like film nights, like you can see there, workshops, like seed bombing workshops, and people were doing all kinds of stuff, and every centimeter of the pub was being used. And it was really, really a great atmosphere. All kinds of people came. We met all people from all over London. We met people who came from Greece. It was just really, really a really, really great experience. And having this space really allow us to do all of this. Also, some other stuff happened in other parts of town, allegedly, but I cannot really talk more about that. So, there's here some photos, but I'm going to have to move on. And yeah, so after the Week of Action was done, and all of, we still had the pub, and we were running it as a social center. Although, less activities, but we were still doing like the occasional talk, open mic nights, stuff like that. And we had like a yoga class of some kind, and we were open to the public, so people would generally like come in and like have a cup of tea and chat with us, and just stay around. And that felt like like we were doing what we wanted to do with the space. But then, as you probably imagine, the pandemic happened. We started to hear things about the about the COVID-19 virus, and we quickly realized that we may have to close the social center to the public, which was quite disheartening to us. Yeah, little by little, we started to like do less and less activities until we finally announced that we will have to cancel our events and close the social center to the public. And yeah, I remember it was quite sad, but also we were kind of overwhelmed by the whole pandemic, and we really didn't have to like time to really think what we were going to do. We were just trying to focus on like surviving the pandemic, getting ready. I mean, the day before the lockdown started properly, we stocked up on cans of food and stuff like that, because most of us were surviving from escaping from from supermarkets and stuff like that. And we were really worried that during the pandemic, like, it will get even harder to get food for us. So we were like quite worried about what was going to happen, like, everyone else. But I can't remember exactly the timeline, but soon after we started to see this talk about mutual aid groups appearing all over London and even outside of London, all over the UK. And we became immediately interested, and we were, and we saw that as, an opportunity to use the space in a useful way during the pandemic. And that's when we decided to turn the grass social center into a mutual aid center. And I'm gonna I'll share some photos, and I'm gonna just talk about, I'm just gonna talk a bit more about the mutual aid networks, because I think it was quite interesting to see. So once we got involved, as you probably knew, at least for us, the way they were organized is that you had Facebook groups for each different locations. In our case, it was the Holloway Mutual Aid group, the Islington Mutual Aid group, and then for like parts of the council, you will have a WhatsApp group, which in our case was the Holloway Mutual Aid group, for organizing locally. And that's with the one we got involved with. Initially, there was a lot of one of the first things that we did to contribute to that was that at the beginning there was a lot of shortages of cleaning products, of disinfectant for your hands, of bleach to clean the things to make sure that they weren't infected by the virus. So we managed to stock up on those from people donating it, and we going around to find them, and then we will tell people in the WhatsApp group that if you needed some, we always had we had something at grass that you could take. And also with leaflets for the mutual aid group, we also printed some of them ourselves, and then other people will bring them to the grass social center, and then we will distribute it to people. So initially it was kind of like a hub for distributing useful things for the mutual aid group, and that kind of gave us an initial foothold into the mutual aid group and the community, and that's how people started to like know us really. That's when people, that's when we started to see things like people, asking where they could get some leaflets, and someone saying, "Oh, you can go to the grass and get some," which was really exciting for us. It was really, really cool. And also something that we started to push for initially is that we had started following the Queer Care guidelines for how to disinfect products to be delivered to people. And so that's one of the things that we promoted among the groups, because there were different like guidelines and recommendations coming from the government, but we found them like quite lacking, and we instead promoted these guidelines created by a grassroots groups, um, which we thought was really important to do. And also we started to like use them ourselves, and share it with people that we were using these methods of disinfecting. uh, I'm gonna skip a couple of yeah uh, I'll get to this one, but yeah, we were like we set up our own disinfecting station on the social center, and we will share photos with people, and we will tell them, hey, we are doing this to clean our products. If it's working out for us, maybe you should do it ourselves. And I think that was important because it kind of like showed people that you didn't have to just follow whatever the government was saying blindly, that the government wasn't the only source of reliable information, and in fact that maybe the government wasn't a great source of reliable information. I'll go back. And something else that we were doing initially as well that I think was important is that we, once we were a bit established, we were doing we were organizing deliveries for people of food from the supermarket. We also wanted to make sure that the radical and political character of mutual aid was communicated to the people, because we were hearing a lot about other mutual aid groups being taken over by the councils, by labor MPs, and being of people joining mutual aid chats and not being able to speak because they had to be approved, and we were hearing all these kind of things. So we were making sure that people were aware that mutual aid is political, and we weren't doing that necessarily by just saying it, because people like just telling people something doesn't really convince them anything. But we were trying to promote other radical political projects that we thought were relevant. The main one at first was the rent strike movement, which caused a lot of polemic in the groups, in ours and in others. But just by explaining to people that they didn't have to be involved in these things, they didn't have to necessarily agree with them, but that it was within the principles of mutual aid, and if so you could just, so you didn't have to get involved, but you should allow it. And having those kind of discussions, not necessarily trying to convince people that they had to join the renter strike, but just by convincing them that something like a renter strike was within the parameters of mutual aid. We were able to somewhat navigate that and have these discussions in a somewhat productive manner. And I think that that contributed to keeping mutual aid, the mutual aid group, a bit more politically motivated, a bit more politically aware, that many other groups end up becoming. Something we also did to kind of like aid with that is that we wrote a series of principles of how the group was worked and what its values were. So they will be able to articulate what mutual aid is in simple terms, and people could read them and understand it without having to use complicated jargon or reference to like anarchist writers for the 19th century and stuff like that we thought people didn't really care about. So we wrote these principles in case someone cannot see them in the presentation. There were just 6, which were: we organize on the basis of solidarity, not charity. We're against all forms of oppression, including but not limited to racism, sexism, ableism, ageism, transphobia, xenophobia, and classism. We work together on an equal basis, democratically and with all leaders. We are self-organized, decentralized, and independent from political parties and other institutional authorities. We actively take initiative. when both offering and receiving support. We recognize that this crisis will affect some more than others, so we prioritize the needs of those most affected. I think these principles were shared both with our group and with other Islington groups and some other people. I don't know exactly how influential they were. I don't think that much they were that influential, but I do know at least one or two groups took them as inspiration for their own groups and keep them in mind. So I think it was worth mentioning that we were trying to articulate, the idea of mutual aid into words that people will understand, because there was clearly an issue of people joining these kind of groups with a mindset that was much more charity than really mutual aid or even solidarity. So we thought that was important. Something we were also able to do is that when we set up a crowdfunding campaign for a group, for the Holloway Mutual Aid group, because initially we were just limited to doing deliveries for people from the supermarkets to their house, but the people will have to pay back for those deliveries, for that food, or which in most cases that's understandable. But we also thought that there were people who couldn't afford to pay, or who were for example, elderly people actually couldn't pay because they didn't have access to internet payment. They couldn't repay using PayPal or anything like that. And cash wasn't really an option because of the virus. So essentially we had to find a way to get some money to pay for those deliveries. So we set up initially a GoFundMe campaign, and later on an Open Collective page to raise money and pay for those deliveries. And one of the things that we also contributed to was to the payment policy, to the expenses policies of the crowdfunding, on how the money was going to be spent. We were able to we contributed to making sure that to including consensus decision making into the process of deciding how the money is used in the mutual aid group, which I thought was pretty cool, that we were kind of like ingraining these kind of like principles of decision making into the group itself and how it worked. And yeah, I think that the fact that that's something that in many other groups probably didn't happen. So yeah, we were always trying to make a conscious effort to keep the group organizing under autonomous anarchist principles, or whatever you want to call it, without really spelling it out, never saying, "Oh, we have to do this because this is because mutual aid is anarchist and we have to be anarchists." But we were always, showing to people that this is, something that works, something that is reasonable, and that is practical. But we also weren't hiding our political affiliations. That was something else that was very important to us, is that we never were dishonest where we were coming from. And I want to clarify, GAF is not an anarchist group per se. It's not in its principles to be anarchists. Some of us are anarchists from the people who organize under GAF, and we were more explicit in those things. But that clarification should be made. But yeah, when we were organizing in grass and interacting with people, we will never say, "Oh, we are anarchists. We are doing this because we are anarchists." But we will also never hide it. So we will take, when we were taking photos, doing deliveries and stuff like that, I will make sure to always include, the anarchist banner in the background or something else like that. And what I found out is that people didn't really mind that much. They didn't care that you were, an anarchist or anything like that, because you were doing, something nice. You were doing, delivering food for people who needed it. you weren't like hitting them in the head with your politics. That you weren't throwing them a book to the heads to read before getting involved with any of that. You just were doing the work, and you also happen to be a cool neighborhood anarchist. And in generally, people didn't care about that, and that was something that I found, really interesting and really encouraging. That people are not as opposed to radical politics as you may think. I think they're opposed to you trying to proselytize them and try to sell them on your politics. So generally, like leading by the example was the thing that really like worked better to show to with people. Um, Something else that we also did is that, as you can see here and in other photos, although initially we would only deliver food from the supermarkets, um, then we move on to pay for that food from the crowdfunding page when that was necessary. But still, we were finding people who needed food delivered regularly, that couldn't afford to pay for them, and just relying on donations to pay for that food was quite complicated, because if it was like every 2 or 3 days having to pay for their food, it could get quite expensive, and we weren't sure we could afford be able to do that, to cover that just with the crowdfunding page. So by pulling from connections with other groups, we were able to get in contact with Food for All, which is a group that started distributing parcels of food for groups like to mutual aid groups and other social centers, and they will deliver them to us, and we will distribute them among the people who needed it through the mutual aid group. And also we found a couple of hostels near our area with people where they were hosting usually homeless people or people who needed support of some kind during the pandemic, but they weren't providing there any food. The government wasn't paying for their food, so we are starting to deliver parcels of food to them quite regularly, and that was really like where most of the parcels of food that we were delivering went to, actually. So that was something else that was quite cool. And in all these things of setting up the crowdfunding, starting to deliver food, all these things, what I found out and what we found out is that initially people in the mutual aid group will be a bit reticent to it. They will be a bit concerned that this was something that we had to talk about it more, we have to plan more, we have to study more. Can you really do that? Is it going to work out? How is it going to work out? I don't really need. They were, they were naturally like trying to introduce a lot of bureaucracy into it. But we found that the best way to break through that is by just doing it. So what will happen quite often is that we will, talk with them about, hey, maybe we are thinking of, setting a crowdfunding. What do you think? And all these like complaint, but worries will come up, and concerns, and how they will do it, and then we will just like be, well, so we just did it, and is there, what do you think? And they were like, well, actually, now that I see it, it is quite nice, let's do it. And this happened every time. Like most of the discussions, I think, people generally were at first a bit intimidated by just the idea of just taking action with a huge amount of bureaucracy without getting the approval from other groups. They were a bit, the way of organizing autonomously was a bit difficult for some of them. But by just doing it yourself, by just taking the initiative, we found that people accepted it quite quickly. That once they saw it working, that was, that was the best argument you could ever make. And that's how we won a lot of these. We were able to do a lot of these things, is by uh, you know, uh, uh, by the power of autonomous action. But honestly, um, another thing that I think was quite interesting in how we did things is that, and that is represented in these photos, is that we were sharing stuff on social media and with the mutual aid group about our activities. At first, we were a bit more coy about our politics and stuff. Um, but actually, we found out, like I was saying before, that we will send in these photos of some of us delivering some food, uh, with some, like, incendiary posters in the background, but then we will put some parcels of food in the foreground, and there's this cute uh, comrade who is called Jerry, the mutilated giraffe, and who became sort of a character in our social media presence and our communication with the groups. And I think this contrast between quite obviously radical politics and wholesome mutual aid images work quite well in getting people used to get this idea of, like, of changing people's mind about what anarchies and radical politics is and looks like. um, and together with the fact that when people will come to grass to pick up some food or parcel or something else, all the walls will be covered in posters and banners and all kinds of stuff, and they will see us there, and they will see like that we were all living there, and they will see, oh well, oh, you're squatting this place. We were like, yes, yeah. And I think that contrast, I think that was very important in kind of like getting people to rethink their assumptions about things. um Also, quite cool. We were able to, again, thanks to our connections with people, a Conrad was able to give us this tricycle that we will use to deliver some of the bigger parcels of food to one of the nearby hostels, and so we would go around, the Holloway with our anarchist tricycle to deliver food, which again was quite fun. Um, Something else we did eventually, this was more during the kind of like once the summer started and the good weather started, is that outside the pub we set up a community fridge, which we will stock with food that we will, found ourselves to, our normal means. Um, and also sometimes with people will use it and put food themselves, so it wasn't all us, which was really cool. And people from the hostels will take it, or other people will take it, and we told the mutual aid group about it, so some people from the mutual aid group came as well and put some food. And we also set up a mutual aid bookshop or library or whatever you want to call it, with books, and in the same way, people will come and take them and sometimes leave some. um, and yeah, we will always, as you can see, combine radical messages and symbols with this kind of like more wholesome things we were doing, and the response was always quite positive. Whenever we were bringing up overtly political things like the renter strike and the groups, we will get a lot of, initially we will get quite a lot of like a rejection. But when we were doing these kind of things, where we're also overtly radically political, very radical and very political in our symbols, in our messages and stuff, but we were combining it with these like obviously wholesome things that no one could really like deny were cool, we actually didn't get any rejection. We never got a single comment or anything like that was negative. um, um, Something else, like I was saying before, that we also did is to kind of like try to show solidarity with other struggles. So one of them was the renter strike, which we promoted in the groups, and we also did like a cute banner in or mural outside one of the windows. And the other one was, when the George Floyd murder happened, we put up a poster outside, and we talk about it on the mutual aid groups and on Facebook. And our objective with this wasn't as much to necessarily, organize or do any action with the mutual aid groups, although that kind of stuff would have been really cool, and there were some attempts. But I think the main purpose that this achieved is, to keep the conversation open to other kinds of radical politics besides just delivering food to people, which is important. But we wanted, something we found is that a lot of groups were quite close-minded in that they will be just, we only deliver food, that's all we do, that's what we sign up for. And I think by kind of like keeping it open to other politics, we open people's mind just a bit, to what mutual aid could be outside of that, and the actual potential of mutual aid. Although I would say, because of lack of capacity and time and stuff, we didn't put a lot of emphasis on this, so not a lot of actual organizing came out of this. But yeah, I think it was worthwhile attempts. Oh, and also another act of solidarity is that near where we were, there was this park where a bunch of trees were going to be felled, and there was this ongoing local campaign to stop that from happening. They had started before COVID-19. It had been going on for some time, and a few of the people in Grass got involved with it, and actually, some of them got up on the trees and stopped the felling of the trees. And I think they actually succeeded in doing so. I haven't, and from what I know, I don't know if there has been any update. We haven't heard. They're still up there. And I think, that's another thing that we did, to kind of like, continue building links with the local people, and just trying to get involved with the community and be part of the community. And also, other unrelated stuff happened nearby on May Day. But I don't know anything about it. Just some stuff happened. Yeah, that's just interesting stuff. Let's move on. And finally, after, I don't know, 3-4 months, we were evicted from the pub by, among others, these lovely people you see on the left, which, yeah, I forgot to cover their faces. That's my bad. Anyway. And yeah, it was quite sad. We got they arrived at 7. We were woken up at 7 in the morning, but quite low noses. I must say, it took them a few blows to open the door, more than they were expecting. Long live the barricades. But eventually gave in, and we were evicted. And generally, there wasn't much hope to stop this. As you can see on the photo on the right, the George is surrounded by windows. We could have tried to, fortify all of it, barricade everything, and try to stop them. But we thought that, our time there was, we have done as much as we could in our time there. If we were going to have organizing a proper eviction resistance to the level that it would require to hold as a place so exposed as this, we just couldn't continue doing any of the mutual aid stuff that we were doing. So there was no point in trying to do something like that. So we just move on and got out. Uh, and yeah, that was kind of the end of the grass project. Um, Next, I want to kind of like reflect on a few lessons that I personally learned from this experience. The first one is that, well, I think hopefully most of us already agree with it, but the idea, that mutual aid and autonomous organizing works and is effective. We were able to organize quite fast and quite effectively, and under really difficult circumstances, um, in a way that other groups took much longer. I'm pretty sure we were the first group to have a crowdfunding campaign in all of Islington, and the first one to have to be not we weren't the first one to be distributing food, but we were one of the first one in London. And I think that was because among ourselves we were organizing with this in these autonomous ways. Uh, the other thing that I learned that I've been talking that I also mentioned before is that I learned that there's no need to hide your politics when you're interacting with, non-radical, so-called non-radicalized people, and as long as you are putting your work first, you're actually doing the work, and that's the thing that you're going first with always, and you're not trying to proselytize them. Uh, you have to go with the mindset that you are there to do like mutual aid, that you're there to actually show solidarity to and do the work. And then if people are interested in getting involved with the more theoretical or political aspects of it, they can, but and you don't have to hide it from them in any way, but it shouldn't be your focus or the first thing you open with. In the end, your actions is really what speaks for you. We also found that having a physical and visible presence in a community goes a long way, normalizing your politics, and getting people used to the idea of having anarchists and squatters around and working with us. But we also found that on itself is not enough to reach out to attract people who are radicalized. And by that I mean that although many people would be sympathetic to us, just by us being there and doing all these things on its own, that doesn't necessarily mean that even initially that they will come inside the social center, that they will get involved in the more political aspects of it. Um, that only happened with when we were taking actions with them, when we were doing organizing with them to provide food and deliver food. That's what got people to actually interact more directly with us. So again, your actions is really what drives forward your interaction with the community, and what actually builds the links of solidarity that you want to have with them. It's not enough to just be around. It's not enough to just have posters and banners outside. You have to propaganda by the date is what works. And something else that I learned, or that I saw in practice, is that the biggest source of power, not in the authoritarian sense, but of capacity to take action around us, is the connections of solidarity we have built in the past. This is really how we were able to organize all the things. It's not because we were super proficient or experienced. We were quite inexperienced. We were quite over our heads the whole time, quite overwhelmed. Thanks to having connections with amazing people that we have met through the Week of Action, through our organizing with GAF and other radical groups, we were able to reach out to them and build a collective strength to provide to distribute food, to provide to source the fridges that we needed to store it, the tricycle, all these things were only possible because we had those amazing connections. And there's some people in here who are part of those connections listening, and I would like to thank them because that's really how all of this was possible. So I think the lesson here is that in order to achieve things like this, you have to cultivate connections with other people and build collective power with them, and that's what allows you to do all these things. And we also found that autonomous social centers and other autonomous spaces like this are extremely useful for organizing more radical actions. Allegedly, I don't have any first-hand experience with this, obviously, but that seems to be quite true. And in fact, if you study how the insurrectionary anarchist movement in Spain, in Italy developed, it developed around a network of social centers, and I think it's very similar in places like Greece and in Spain. These kind of spaces are really useful where organizing, direct action on a more radical kind. Although, yeah, but we can't really go into more detail than that. Also, from a personal point of view, or the things that I think were our main successes, is that we were able to become accepted as part of the community by a lot of the people we came in contact. Obviously, there's people we never interacted directly that much with, and that maybe they changed a bit their mind just by seeing the grass social center when they were walking by. But with the people we actually talked with and interacted with, I think they accepted us as part of the community, and we formed quite good connections with them. Some of those still remain to this day, and I think that's probably, in my opinion, the biggest success that we achieved. Also, I think we were able to significantly delay the co-option of the group, or the mutilate group, by the council, and the scope, and expand the scope of radical politics allowed. Again, there's a lot of other groups, other mutilate groups, that we were more quickly co-opted by the local MPs, by Labour MPs and stuff like that, that it turned into some form of charity for middle class people to help the needy and all that kind of bullshit. And I think, although we didn't manage to completely stop it, and in my opinion, right now most of the mutilate groups have turned into have been completely co-opted by the councils. I think we definitely delayed it, and we open a bit of a space for more radical politics to be introduced into the group. And that was just not just us, but there were other people in Islington in the mutilate groups that were also doing this kind of work, and that they also made an amazing job in this. And I cannot speak for them, but we weren't the only ones doing it. But I think we contributed to that. And finally, I think we were able to change the image of anarchists and squatters in some people's minds. This is again hard to quantify, but just talking with people, I don't necessarily turn anyone into an anarchist, but I think we definitely made them change their minds about what an anarchist is. And I remember a few months ago, after the grass project was finished, we have moved on. We had a small meeting of the people who have been more active in the mutilate group. We met together in the park, and I remember this old nice lady who worked in the NHS telling me at the end, "Oh, you should tell me more about these anarchist things one of these days. Explain what anarchism is," which was really, really nice. But yeah, I think generally that was something very positive that we were able to achieve. No, I don't think anyone in Holloway is going to be, throwing Molotov cocktails to the cops anytime soon just because we were there. But hopefully when they see others do that, they won't be immediately horrified by it, maybe. And finally, a few of the, I think, mistakes and lessons that we made that I think people should be aware of is one that there were several internal dynamics in our own on the people in grass that caused trouble. I think one of them is that not everyone was, let's say, had the same idea of what grass was going to, was, and they were committed to the idea of the social center, and that's perfectly fine. There were people there who just wanted to live, which is that's something that everyone should be able to. But that did cause some tension because we needed the space. The space was quite small, and if people were staying up till late or doing those kind of things, which it's not my place to really judge that. That's everyone can do whatever the fuck they want, but it did get in the way of some of the mutilated stuff. So that's not to say like certain behaviors are acceptable or not. That's just to say that if you want to have a project like this, having people under the same space, like so small like this, with different interests, different like priorities, can make it quite difficult. So that's something that should be keep in mind. And another lesson that I think we learn is that being strict again with the people that you let in into a project like this is quite important. Because of the pandemic, we allow people to stay in the building, which we may have not allowed otherwise, and also because of lack of experience, in my opinion, with squatting, among some of us at least. And that caused a lot of trouble because there were people who were toxic in some ways, from my personal opinion. So I think in retrospective we would have been much more strict with that kind of stuff. It's quite harsh to say, but I think that these projects, the internal dynamics are usually what makes them come apart with any kind of like autonomous organizing. So being aware of those things is quite important. And the other aspect of it is what I've come to understand as the difference between what dual power is and what mutualate is. I think as a general reflection, we succeeded in taking some legitimacy away from the state by taking over some of its functions where it had lost control of them. And with that, we showed that autonomous ways of organizing can work, but we didn't succeed in translating those autonomous ways of organizing to other people, because by simply replacing the functions of the state, we then change how they subjugate themselves to authority. So once the state regained its foothold, they went back to be subjected to it. So I think I will argue that the mutual networks that appear generally didn't achieve to be really mutual aid. I think in some cases there were forms of dual power, where you will have alternative structures to the state that took legitimacy away from it and replace it in some ways. But when we are creating dual power structures, as anarchists, we have to realize that it's not enough to replace the state. At GRAS, we were able to use the effectiveness of autonomous organizing within ourselves to establish a very limited form of dual power, very, very limited. But that on its own only allows us to take power. Our objective is to destroy it. It's not enough for people to follow the lead of anarchists. We must spread the libertarian mindset among people and turn them into autonomous and proactive individuals. Anarchism must be spread not just an idea. In fact, it doesn't have to be spread as an idea, but as internalized behavior. And the only way we are going to ever be able to do that is by creating models of dual power that require people to involve themselves in autonomous organizing in order to satisfy their own needs. That's my personal opinion, at least. And I will argue that the mutual networks that appear generally didn't achieve that, because they rarely broke down the barriers between the people giving aid and the people receiving it. They rarely achieved true mutuality. One could imagine an alternative situation in which the WhatsApp groups, the WhatsApp chats, will post people in the WhatsApp chats will post requests for help, and someone else could offer to fulfill it without any kind of bureaucracy needed. And there will never be a static distinction between who gives and who receives aid. Instead, everyone participates in both at different points. But that generally didn't happen. First, because the people who needed help most urgently, in the form of shopping and food, generally couldn't reciprocate in the same way to others. They could, if you couldn't buy food for yourself, you couldn't do it for others. But still, it is not hard to imagine ways in which they could have aided others in different ways, such as doing admin work for the group, chatting with other lonely people in the group, and stuff like that. But that also didn't happen because of other reason, which is that people are not generally used to organizing this way. So naturally, a certain type of organization developed in which people who wanted to provide aid joined the WhatsApp groups, and people who needed aid simply would call to the phone and never become fully part of the group. And these two groups will rarely merge. This could have been avoided by requiring people who needed aid to join the WhatsApp group and asking them to help in some other way with clear guidance on how to do so. But in practice, I don't think it was always possible, as many of them were elderly people who didn't really knew that we are on WhatsApp. But I think with a good number of them, it could have been done. Instead, what happened in Holloway Mutual Aid and in other groups with more of an autonomous anarchist presence was that the group themselves or entities within, such as ourselves and Corporation Kentish Town, I think, became dual power structures that replaced the functions of the state by taking advantage of autonomous principles. And this, of course, was reinforced by the concept referring people to us like we were a fucking service to them, and already priming people to expect a service and forcing us to accommodate that kind of model in order to respond to those requests. But thinking about all of these things now, to what extent this could have been done without turning a significant number of people away in a moment of crisis is really up for debate. And the question then becomes, what is the best way to use this moment of crisis and retreat of the state authority? Do we completely focus on creating mutuality within the people joining the group, even if it means reaching many less people and potentially leaving some of the most vulnerable people on their own? Or do we use the power vacuum of the state to establish a dual power that can be used to spread certain basic principles and ideas among people, such as solidarity or charity, and then later use this advantageous position to introduce people to a model that actually push mutual aid in practice? I don't know, maybe a mix of both. I think one important aspect of our capacity to be spreading autonomous organizing during times of crisis is how much previous infrastructure and experience we have. These questions around spreading mutuality came up among us frequently, and we even raised them with the group, but they were rarely put into practice. First of all, because our lack of experience in this kind of situations meant that we had trouble articulating them in practical terms. And second, because by the time, sorry, we had a message. And second, because we were too busy figuring out how to organize the most basic aspects of food distribution by the time we had. And by then, once we were actually organized, many harmful dynamics were already established, and we had to change even among us in the groups. If we had more of these structures in place already, it would have been more easy to ask people to engage in true mutual aid practice. As it is, or as it was hard to ask people to implicate themselves that much when you had so little to offer initially. And this is why I believe that we should see this instance of spontaneous anarchist adjacent organizing during the pandemic not as a defeat because we weren't able to effectively spread autonomous organizing among people, but rather Given the previous lack of this kind of structures in the UK, we must accept that the horizon of what we could realistically achieve was quite limited. Instead, we should see this as the first step towards doing that in the future. We should use the connections gained and the lessons learned to create these real mutual networks and dual power structures, so that when another crisis comes, we're in a much better position to react. Times of crisis and insurrection can almost never be predicted and tend to create a cycle of periods of great activity followed by a decline. Our best chance is to do as much as we can to save the energy produced in these moments into long-term projects that can conserve it and slowly expand it. So the next time a crisis happens, we are in a much better position to respond. In this way, creating a positive feedback that hopefully one day will create enough energy to destroy capitalism and the state. And that's the end of my presentation. Yeah, thanks so much, everyone. I hope that was useful. Sorry for going on for so long. Before we move into the Q&A, the discussion part of the presentation, I want to remind people that if you want to organize under the GAF banner, you can do it, just by agreeing with our principles. And also, if you want to, need some help with that, or want to get involved with us in London or in any of the other groups, you can go to our website, greenanticapitalist.org, or send us an email at greenanticapitalistfront@riseup.net. We're always happy to help, and we're always open to new ideas and projects and stuff. With that out of the way, now I want to do that should be a Q&A, not Q&Q. Anyway, a robust Q&A. I have a few questions that I like people to think about, and if you have ideas to respond to any of these questions, now is when I would like you to contribute and say what you think. I would like people to discuss what was your experience during the pandemic with the mutilate groups. What strategies did you use to make them more radical? What strategies can we use to promote mutilate outside ourselves during crisis? And how can we prepare for the next cycle of crisis? So now, if you have... oh, yeah, I think the Bookfair wants a moment to wrap up the stream. I'm going to shut up now, I guess. Sorry for going for so long.
I didn't actually mean we needed a window to speak, but you'll have to get there. Yeah, no, I just did it in between the Q&A. I've directed people who want to ask some questions to jump on, so maybe you want to give them a minute. We're going to carry on with the next session. It was really good. Thank you for having us, and thank you for letting us share that. Take care.
Thank you. I guess we have lost the questions that were asked in the Twitch of the book fair, which is a shame. Yeah, so I don't know if people want to.
Also people with music, if you had any music themed events.
What's that?
I've just been listening. So it was questions. I was wondering, with your social centre, did you have any like DJs or any acoustic music or anything like that?
Yeah, so we had open mic night,
Cool.
and we had some people perform, like poetry and singing and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, obviously that was before the pandemic, but yeah, we were definitely like.
I've been going to some Scratchwood parties off Edgware where they're even on when the pandemic was on. But no, just I was involved. I've been involved with the Matilda in Sheffield, and we had some amazing. We had parties with Northern Techno Alliance and Redemption and stuff. It's awesome when you sort of mix reggae and sort of like anti-corporate sort of trance. You can have a great atmosphere and stuff. So. I'll probably get back to you. I'm always. That's what I'm mainly involved on cultural music side really. So just
yeah,
build
that's
contact.
yeah, that's something that we were definitely like yeah, it would have been cool if the pandemic hadn't happened. We would have really been able to host many other events. Although because of the location, because we were just we had like people living above us, we also had restrictions with like
of course,
volume and stuff.
Yeah. Just I said, yeah. So like said like poetry. Well,
Yeah,
I live
yeah.
in Milton. Yeah,
Yeah, that
things
kind
like scribal gathering and in Stony, Milton Keynes and stuff.
yeah.
What's going on with that one?
Is there any other? Do people have any questions, or do they want to make any contributions? I don't know. There has been a lot of talk in the chat that I haven't been able to keep up with. I don't know if people want to raise their hand or say something on the chat or unmute yourself and say something as well. I've been speaking for way too long and I'm really tired. So if people want to speak, share the ideas now, that would be great. I don't see any other questions so far.
I think maybe we could read some of the things because people have been talking in the chat about things they've done. So unless number 10-0X wants to speak, we could just read out their descriptions of what. Yes, that's because when you joined, you chose the headphones symbol instead of the mic symbol when you joined the stream. I mean, a way out of it is to leave it and rejoin again, and we can wait for you, or we can just read out what you wrote. Okay, it didn't work. To give you a bit of a rest, I can read out some of the things because they were describing that in their mutual aid group, they grew a food project out of it, which is very interesting, and that then it's still going on, and they're giving a box of free vegetables to 30 or 40 families a week, which is pretty amazing. Yeah. And they're up in Tottenham, and they said that if anybody lives around there in the N15 area, they're always looking for more volunteers. So that's something pretty great.
Yeah, that's great. That's one of the weaknesses that we had in our, with the our social center is that because it was squatted, it always had a caducity date, so we couldn't really like. Also lack of experience, but we couldn't really establish or we weren't good enough at establishing these more long-term structures, and that's something that if I had the experience that I have now back to these things is something that I would have done from the very beginning. Focus more on doing something more like establishing something more long-term. But yeah, as it were, we just didn't have the capacity to do that.
So number 10-0X has put a link to their food hub if anybody's interested. So the link is in the chat. Yeah, and they're explaining more details that they've been going on for 26 weeks, and they managed to borrow space from a church.
That's amazing.
And then they used their local renewer group, which had a community center. So they were managed to get spaces donated, which is great. There's also a question from Am, who also has no mic, which is, what do you think is the most important thing people should do for preparing for potential further lockdown? Which is something that Gretchen has also seconded. Yeah, because we're definitely going back into lockdown.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have answers for this, but personally, what I'm focusing on is right now is the food co-op model of Cooperation Town. I'm setting up near where I am right now, and that was another project during the lockdown that did some amazing work, way more than we actually did, to be honest. We had different conditions with this the fact that we were a squad and all that. But they were able to deliver food to a lot of people during the lockdown, and now they're getting back to the food co-op model. And I'm gonna try to do the same, because that, in my opinion, puts the mutual aid into the structure of the group from the very beginning. It requires people to actually get involved themselves in organizing to provide for themselves, which is what mutual aid is all about, in my opinion. And I think that's having that properly set up will give us a much better foothold to start with. Also, I think we need to expand and link. I think the other aspect that is going to be very important is the housing aspect. I think here in London renters unions are doing some really good stuff. So I think definitely organizing around the housing and eviction resistance is going to be a big factor, because I think in terms of food distribution, the government and the councils have recuperated a lot of it already. And I don't think we are going to see the same situation of people not being able to provide food for themselves like we saw in the first lockdown. But we are going to see a lot of people getting evicted, most likely. So that will be another big focus for me.
Greta has something to say. Would you like to unmute and speak it, or would you prefer to read it for you? Okay, I think Greta might prefer somebody reads it for them. So Greta is asking, what about federating radical mutual aid networks across the country to support and inspire each other? She says, here mental night shelters aren't going to be all winter, so we could work on finding spaces for homeless people.
So on the federated ones, there's actually a group that is doing that already. We promoted it in one of the previous streams. Mutual, I think it's called something like Mutual Aid Federation or something like that. It is on Facebook. I can look it up later. But yeah, that sounds like a really good idea. Definitely. And even a better idea, which I've also thought about, is providing housing for people who are going to be kicked out into the streets, because a lot of people were housed by the government, who were either because they were homeless or immigrants during the pandemic. As an exception, that's not going to go forever. So I think that's something that anarchists and other radical activists should organize around. And in fact, that's something else I'm looking into with some of the other groups I'm involved with. I think right now there's an opportunity in that many of these people are in the same places, and it's easier to reach them. And I will encourage people to do just that and start organizing with them, because it's definitely going to happen. And also, something to keep in mind is that among these people are immigrants with no legal recourse to aid, I think, or something like that. Basically, people with an immigration status, that means that the government has no obligation whatsoever to provide them with any help, and they haven't received any so far, with the only exception of the being housed during the pandemic as a emergency measure. Once that finishes, they will have nothing again. And in my opinion, people who are completely left out by the state, who receive no aid whatsoever from them, that will be the people who we should organizing with. But yeah, those are really good points. Thank you, Grija. Yeah, Grija just found the Facebook group and shared it on the chat for the Mutual Aid Federation or UK Federation or whatever it's called. Yeah, and from what I understand, it was set up by some cool people. I haven't looked too much into it, but I think it's definitely an interesting project. It's called Mutual Aid UK. Yeah. Anything else? I think if not, we can currently get into the limit of time we usually when we usually finish. If people don't have any more questions, which is fair enough, I've gone for too long. The presentation took way longer than I thought. This is what happens for finishing preparing it for like an hour before the actual start and not being able to rehearse it even once. Okay, yeah, I think So I'm gonna check the Twitch chat very quickly just in case we got some questions in there. I don't think there's someone shared a link to the Liverpool Migrant Solidarity, but sadly Twitch doesn't allow to share links. But yeah, I think that's going to be all for us. So I'm gonna go back to it. It's a nice ending. Yeah, so thanks so much everyone for listening. I hope you found this interesting and useful. I want to say that this is just my personal experience. It doesn't necessarily represent an absolute truth, and this has been a really a learning process for me, and I think I still have a long way to go. I think we all do. So please, keep the conversation going. Feel free to reach out to us if you have any more ideas, and more important of all, take action yourself. Try things. This is the thing that I've learned over the last few months, that if you dare to take action and go out there and reach out to people and talk with them and organize with them, you can actually achieve things, and people are much more willing to organize with you that you can never imagine at first, if you are actually offering something in return. If you are not just trying to convert them, if you are not just trying to sell it then a goddamn newspaper or any bullshit like that, if you're actually trying to do something useful and relevant in their lives. Yes. So yeah, like Gru just said, just fucking do it. And yeah, that's going to be all for us. Feel free to find us on greatanticapitalist.org and email us and on all that. And hopefully I'll see you all soon in the streets. Okay. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you so much. Bye. Death to capitalism. Low life, mutual aid.